All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to meeting 4 of the Advisory Finance Committee, held remotely. Per Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Advisory Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website at town.westborough.ma.us. Members of the public who wish to watch this meeting may do so in the following manner: on youtube.com/Westborough TV, or on Westborough TV Verizon Channel 28 or Charter Channel 192. Or there will be a recorded version on westboroughTV.org under the Government tab, Meetings on Demand. Thank you, everyone.
Sean, can I just?
Why don't I pass it over to you, John?
All right. Yes. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everyone. I wanted to welcome Walter Leslie as an appointment to the Advisory Finance Committee. As you know, Terry McGoldrick had requested that he resign and sort of enjoy his life after work and get beyond the committee work. And after looking around and talking to a number of people, I found Walter, one of the few people I've ever interviewed who has actually somewhat regularly watched the Finance Committee on TV. So that was a novelty. And I wanted to welcome him. He'll be serving out initially the 2 years that left on Terry's term. And I'll let Walter introduce himself. So again, thanks to all of you, but especially thanks to Walter for taking on the work of the committee.
Oh, we can't hear you, Walter.
Can you turn on?
Yeah, he's.
There we go. See,
right.
I'm just like everybody else. I don't remember to unmute. Anyway, yeah, it is a little embarrassing. I actually watch a lot of the meetings on TV because I have interest in it. Been a resident in town for 22 years. I know actually several of you already from different things. I'm currently the president of the Westborough Civic Club. This is my 3rd year. So in that role, I've actually had a lot of the town manager, the fire, the police chief, all sorts of people in to talk to our group in our speaker meetings, Board of Health, various groups. And I couldn't think of something more civic to do probably than to jump into one of the town volunteer positions and see if I can contribute in some way. I don't know. That's about it. I'm an electrical engineer by trade. I'm still working. And that's about it.
Oh, Walter, thank you very much.
Yep.
Yes, yeah. And I'm sure you will contribute. Thank you. All right, great. So there was really 2 main items on tonight's agenda. They are an update regarding the Affordable Housing Working Group and items potentially coming up on the town warrant in the fall. And then there was also a review of the fall town meeting warrant. I think as we wait for Alan to join us, we can discuss the fall town meeting warrant briefly. So some of you did see the town manager and I spoke today, and they wanted to invite us to do a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen this coming Tuesday at 8 p.m. And I think some of you saw that in the agenda upcoming for the Board of Selectmen. So, and I don't know, I think they try to stay pretty close to time. So I'm assuming if it's 8 p.m., we're going to start at 8 p.m. They do have around 6:30 all the state reps that cover Westborough in the Board of Selectmen meeting. So if you do want to catch some of the meeting beforehand, I think we'll probably hear what's going on with the budget this year, the state budget. So because we're going to do that joint meeting, I think Christy asked that she not cover the budget with us tonight, and we'll do it jointly on Tuesday. I think also she really doesn't we wanted to present to both of us at the same time rather than us hearing about it first. So does that time on Tuesday work for everybody? Tuesday at 8 p.m.? Yeah.
Sean, it's iffy for me, but I'm going to try.
Okay.
I do have out of town guests and who are arriving then leaving Wednesday. I'll see what I can do though. It's my son, my grown son. Now I call him a guest. Anyway, I'm wondering if there's any way we could have financials in front of us before that joint meeting, like if the town finance director could create that table we usually see before we go into a town meeting. Just we get a layout of where we are with the tax rate, and if there's any, I don't know if any of these are financial. I haven't had time to study them, but
Right.
It's really nice when we're reviewing, as usual, we can take every article on its own merits, and that's great. But the bottom line view informs, how we look at each line. I'm just wondering if they can get a draft of our financial, what those balance sheets ready for Tuesday.
Yeah, I'll reach out to Christy and see if how far in advance of the meeting that'll be available. That's a good idea. Oh, and Mr. Edinburgh is here. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. And I get you are as the head of the Affordable Housing Working Group?
Correct. Yes.
All right, excellent. And we did see we have the current version of the town meeting warrant, and we do see, I think, what's currently Articles 9 and 10 are related to affordable housing. So looking forward to hearing about that and just in general what the group is doing. I think if I can hand it over to yourself and.
Okay. If it's okay, I have a short presentation about hopefully 8 minutes, if that's good, if we have time for that.
That sounds great.
Okay, let me start presenting and.
Hey, Alan.
Yes.
It's Mike Beretti. I'm doing the minutes. Can you get me a copy of that presentation?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it should start sharing momentarily. And feel free to interrupt with any questions you might have along the ways. So just as a brief reminder where the concept of a Westborough Affordable Housing Trust came from, it really came up as a result of an affordable housing forum hosted by the Board of Selectmen back in January of this year, which was, to the best of our knowledge, the first time the town had brought together all of the stakeholders involved in affordable housing and housing affordability as an issue in one room at the same time to discuss the issue in detail. And so the first thing that really comes up to is, with respect to housing affordability, what's the challenge we face? Where is Westborough? And just as a base definition, housing affordability is, or housing is seen as affordable according to HUD when the total cost of housing, which would be rent or mortgage payments plus utilities, does not exceed 30% of a household's gross income. When it does, you're considered cost burdened if that monthly housing cost is more than 50% of your gross income for the household. You're considered severely cost burdened. And when we look at where Westborough is comparative to neighboring towns and our data dashboard towns, we're actually about average, a little above, a little below, but nevertheless, at this point, over 40% of renters and almost 16.5% of homeowners are either cost burdened or severely cost burdened. And so it is, even within our community and our demographics, housing affordability is a significant issue. And I think that we had that feedback even a couple of years ago during the strategic planning process. As part of that process in 2018, housing affordability and diversity was ranked as the #2 top priority in the strategic planning process. And the specific recommendations included, creating an affordable housing fund and developing strategies to ensure a variety of housing types and to rehab existing buildings to meet that need where possible. And that's really where a municipal affordable housing trust provides the option for the funding and the means. An affordable housing trust is a public entity. It gets created by an addition to the town's bylaws, accepting part of our Mass General laws. And it operates as a real estate trust with the ability to create, maintain, and preserve affordable housing. It is led by a board of trustees, and we'll get into that in a little more detail, appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And as a public entity, it's still subject to all of the public procurement, designer selection, open meeting, and conflict of interest laws as any other government board or entity would be in Massachusetts. The Mass General Law, it's Chapter 44, Section 55C, if you want some fascinating reading about what trusts are and what they can do. And in general, the state defines the purpose as to provide the creation and preservation of affordable housing in municipalities for the benefit of low and moderate income households. And that's certainly in line with our goals and that the working group has come up with for what we see the need here in Westborough. How they run, by statute, 5 or more trustees, 1 must be a member of the Board of Selectmen. They're appointed by the Board of Selectmen on 2-year alternating terms. We'll have oversight by the Board of Selectmen. There's an asterisk there because that's actually not required, but it is allowed under Mass General Law. And so our working group feels that it's necessary for certain types of transactions and activities that there be a vote of consensus by the Board of Selectmen to provide some fiscal oversight. Administratively, the funds will be held by our town treasurer collector. The finance director will manage the mechanics of acquiring funds, maintaining the monthly bank accounts, disbursement of funds through the normal town process. And by law, there's at least a once-a-year annual audit that's independent that would most likely coincide with the audit that's done for the entire town. A trust is allowed to use town staff and is able to reimburse the town for any town resources and staff used. Some trusts that are larger or very active hire part-time or full-time administrative assistants and staff. And you can also contract with experts relative to programs or specific projects. What can a trust do? It effectively is designed to address those affordable housing needs, has the ability to buy, sell, lease, manage, build, and fund housing projects, a pretty broad range of activities. Most importantly, it's able to support local initiatives, which means we can address projects that both meet the needs of subsidized housing as well as workforce housing. Trusts are often funded by mechanisms through the town, and we can talk about that in more detail. They're also able to receive independently grants, gifts, and some trusts have activities that generate revenue. So some trusts do operate as a landlord and collect rent or lease payments. Those are revenue that comes back into the trust that then become an asset of the trust that can be used as an asset for collateral or for spending on other projects. So when we look at why in Westborough we want an affordable housing trust, we want to create to really achieve the goals outlined in the strategic plan. And really now is the time to act. In part, it's sort of out of opportunity and a little bit out of necessity. We're very fortunate to be expecting both inclusionary zoning as well as zoning mitigation funds from active developments, with some of these funds very specifically designated for affordable housing needs. Creating the trust now lets us capture and use those funds as intended and as the town feels is appropriate. And one thing I want to mention is that any movement of funds from the town to the trust does go before town meeting. And it's an appropriation of the town. So as we defined our mission for the working group, our working mission right now is to provide for the creation and preservation of affordable housing units in Westborough for the benefit of low and moderate income households and to support efforts to improve housing affordability for our community in general. And we added that additional element because we see a broader need and opportunity for the housing trust to potentially participate in projects that serve a broader need around housing affordability. Not everyone that might benefit from more affordable housing qualifies for the subsidized housing inventory. And if you're curious, I can show you a graph that sort of gives the range of where people fall in and how that might impact folks. So part of what we want to do is, as a trust, is we recognize that any effort in housing affordability has impacts on the town, whether it's population, town services, things of that nature, the character of the town. So to ensure that the trust will support the town's strategic objectives and our goals, and to be respectful of the town, we've created a set of 6 principles that will guide the work of the trust. In this, the first one is we want to help maintain the necessary threshold of subsidized housing inventory, which is currently 10%, with respect to Massachusetts General Law, Section 40B. We want to prioritize housing needs based on both data analysis, which tells us what we believe is necessary, but also community input and local initiatives and priorities. We want to promote efforts that span the full range of affordable and workforce housing needs and programs. We want to leverage projects that help maintain the sustainability of the trust. Trusts can spend money in ways that's never recoverable. We also have the ability to do things like pre-permitting construction loans at very low interest rates, where the money comes back into the trust and can be recycled and used for multiple projects, as an example. We certainly want to consider and respect the impact of projects on town services, and we want to respect and reflect the architecture and styles of housing in our neighborhood. So, we're not looking to walk into a residential neighborhood and put up a large building or complex. We're not looking for radical zoning changes to meet the needs. We're looking to blend in affordability into the overall nature and character of the town. And with that, we currently have 4 working priorities. This is actually based on feedback we heard beginning with the community forum in January. In a moment, I'll talk about, we have a community outreach site that we're getting great feedback and resident participation on. And so we're continuing to evolve our set of priorities. Currently, we have these 4 that we've identified, which is obviously around protecting ourselves with 40B, expanding affordable housing options for seniors aged 62 plus. There's a data need and a community desire for that. Increase availability and access to workforce housing. Again, both feedback from the community and the data says that that's a need. And to take steps to preserve existing affordable units. And I will caveat that by saying trusts can't rehab units. So preservation is usually more infrastructure work that's necessary to keep units habitable. So it might be helping with roof replacements. I look at our need. There are, some of the facilities of the Westborough Housing Authority, our needs of sprinklers, those types of activities that help preserve the value of the property, but aren't specifically doing a rehab, and refresh of a unit. So there's some fine lines we have to navigate. Our next steps are really at special fall town meeting on November 14th. 2 warrant articles. One is a vote to create the trust. The second is for some initial funding. Immediately following that, we'd be looking for the Board of Selectmen to appoint the trustees and for the trust to begin its work. The first order of business of the trust will actually be to submit the trust, the declaration of trust, to the Registrar of Deeds, have it submitted, recorded, and certified. At which point the trust would be active, and it could the trust could start identifying and entertaining projects. And we're not talking about any potential projects yet, although we have heard an earful from many people on some great ideas and some very creative ideas that we'll be able to discuss once the trust is up and running. As I mentioned, we put up a community site. The URL is up there. I'm happy to send an email for everyone with the link if you haven't received yet or haven't had an opportunity. And so that's, an overview of, where we're at, the need, how the trust can help, and what we're looking forward to accomplishing with the trust. And I guess at this point, I would like to open it up for any questions.
All right, Alan, thank you very much. Is there anybody initially who has any questions they would like to ask?
I do.
Melanie, please go ahead.
Hi, Alan. Thank you for the presentation. I just have a couple questions. So you said the trust can't rehab, but when you say that, I'm wondering, can you convert? So can you take retail or office-like space and convert it into affordable housing?
Yes. So when we say the trust can't rehab, the trust can't go into existing affordable housing and put in new carpeting or new kitchen cabinets, right? What we can do is the rehab and represent, we've got several options. Not just commercial or retail space, but even existing residential units. And so there are housing trusts in Massachusetts where, based on their demographics and their need, every year the trust will purchase 1 or 2 homes at market rate, will do necessary repairs, bring them up to code, address any issues, and then convert them, add the deed restriction for affordability, and then sell them as affordable housing through the lottery system and increase their housing stock. Several years ago, well, a few years ago in Yarmouth, there was a hotel resort that the family, the children, I guess, their grandchildren didn't want to run it. The family shut it down. Their housing trust partnered with a private nonprofit developer and subsidized the renovation of that into 69 units of senior affordable housing. The developer as a nonprofit bore the majority of the cost. The trust subsidized to the tune of $30,000 per unit. The total cost to the trust was $2.1 million, and the result was 69 brand new units. And so one of the advantages of the trust is we don't have to be the builder, but we can participate in programs in a way that leverage the funds available to their greatest value.
Okay. And then you talked about 10%, according to the Mass General Law. Are we meeting that now? Do you know? In
Yeah, so currently Westborough is in really good shape. We are at, we're 13.6%, I believe, of affordable housing. The projection, all things being equal, of known developments and known plan developments is that following the 2020 census will be in the 11.5 to 11.2 range. Now, depending on how the actual census comes out, it might be a little higher. There's a risk of it being lower. And then the risk then becomes, given our typical rate of development, even with some of the new zoning changes, we run the risk of being, close to or possibly slightly below that for the 2030 census. And so we're looking now to help support a robust affordable housing stock to ensure that we stay above that 10% threshold.
Okay. And I have one last question, sorry. So when you say the trust can't rehab, I'm just curious, for example, let's say you redo a home, and I work with elderly and I work with indigent, right?
Yep.
And their circumstance changes. And let's say we've gotten them into a product or a home that has carpeting, and they're on a walker now and they need a different type of flooring. What prohibits us from doing like that rehab component? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. I'm not sure that would be prohibitive. I think one of the issues is whether or not the individuals in that home is a purchase or as a rental. If trusts have the ability to, under the maintenance guidance and preservation, have the ability to spend funds and or lend money to do work on forms that are deeded, on homes that are owned but deeded affordable. So for example, if there's a house that's certified as affordable by deed, and in order for the person to remain in the home, it needs a new air conditioning unit, right? And the owner can't afford to do it, the trust can assist with that. And I believe, I'll double check and I can get back to you, but I believe it ends up being a lien on the property that when the home is sold, again, as affordable, the trust is partially or fully reimbursed.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
the rules around that. So, again, the rehab rule is really about not having trusts funnel money into housing authorities to do, upgrades and maintenance work that should be coming out of the financial reserves of the housing authority.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Andrew, do you have a question?
Thank you. Alan, I was wondering if you could talk for a moment about what the expectation or responsibility would be for the trust to coordinate with school, fire, police for any thoughts or concerns they'd have about any units coming online or any units transitioning to affordable.
So one of our guiding principles is to be sensitive and aware and consider the impact on town services. And so those discussions would definitely happen. Again, also any activity undertaken by the trust still goes through the, still has to adhere to zoning rules, still has to go through the standard planning processes and the standard permitting processes. So all of those considerations, even mitigation plans, are still part and parcel of any project that the trust would get involved with. So those issues would be brought to the forefront. And as a guiding principle, we want to be, I would say, and I think the members of the working group would back me up, we would want to be more sensitive to the impact on town services than a typical developer would.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, Paul.
Oh, thanks. Alan, I think I've heard you at Board of Selectmen meetings say that it was sort of established wisdom that public or affordable housing created by private or nonprofit or something, as opposed to government owned or government built or something, was superior. I think I've heard you say that, but either way, how would that blend with this concept?
Well, effectively, because the trust is a real estate trust, we can partner with, it really comes down to the cost of development, right? And that when public entities, go through construction process, the procurement rules, fair wage requirements and other things, I know, Steve Durrett knows these numbers by heart, but it basically puts a cost per square foot that can be anywhere from 30 to 80% greater than a private developer would. And so the trust has mechanisms where we can partner with, in most housing trusts, partner with nonprofit companies that specialize in affordable housing development. We have ways that we can partner that don't trigger some of those requirements, such as providing the construction financing up until the permit is issued, right? Where there's actually no construction work happening yet. We can save a nonprofit developer tens of thousands of dollars in construction loan interest on design, architecture, design, hazmat testing, all of the things that has to happen before you get in front of the planning board and get, the plans approved. And there are other mechanisms that we can do in that public-private partnership that don't trigger the additional cost overhead that typically accompanies government development.
Right, and nonprofits can also take advantage of volunteer labor.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
And we can bring in grant money too, which is another, opportunity.
Great. Beth, and then Walt, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Am I on mute? Okay.
No, we can hear you.
Thank you. So I actually have sort of two questions, and they're both kind of asking for definitions. I think you started to hit on the definition of rehab. So that's one of my questions, because I think I'd like to hear it as a concrete definition, because that was very little confusing. The other definition I'd like to kind of hear is, what's the definition of workforce?
Okay, so actually let me I'm going to handle the last one first.
Thank you.
And I have a slide. Let me find it here quickly. Oh, let me get to the pretty picture. Okay, so actually, let me start with rehab. So rehab is repair, maintenance, major repairs, maintenance, and upgrades that are generally considered part of the normal course of long-term building ownership.
Okay.
Right, and generally it's considered specific to the interior of the unit, and the work isn't necessarily required to keep the unit habitable, right? So where a trust can go into preserving affordable housing is with health and safety issues and with major repairs that involve habitability. So for example, if we had affordable housing where the roof was leaking and we're starting to see mold problems, right, those units with mold come off the affordable housing market. They can't be rented, they can't be sold, people might need to move out. So assisting with those types of major repairs is within the purview of a trust. If a housing authority or a private developer with affordable housing is looking to refresh the units because the carpeting is 6 years old and it hasn't been painted in 5 years, that's not considered, that's rehab, but it's not eligible for housing trust funds and assistance.
If the refrigerator breaks, is that eligible?
That would not be eligible.
Okay, just trying to get
Right.
a sense of it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
In an owned affordable unit, that would be the responsibility of the homeowner. In a rental unit, depending on whether or not the rental included the refrigerator, it would be the authority or the private developer or the resident.
Okay.
With respect to affordability and workforce housing, most affordable housing that can qualify for subsidized housing inventory, or what most people think of as affordable housing, is really meant to be affordable for households that are at 80% or less of the area median income.
Okay.
And many affordability programs for SHI also have asset limitations, and those vary widely based on the program. Workforce housing is generally seen, the federal government says it's 60 to 120% of area median income. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts has authorized programs as high as 135%, but generally it's seen as 130% of area median income. To give a sense, the area median income for Eastern Worcester County, where we are, is just over $106,000 for a family of 4.
Okay.
And so this is a pretty broad range for household incomes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Alan. My question, first of all, in the cost burden number with the homeowners that you said included utilities and a mortgage, but is it also include like real estate tax? It's like total cost of
It's
home
intended to be
ownership
total
or
cost,
something
yeah.
like that? Okay. And the second question, I guess, is you mentioned initial funding of this or something. Is that sort of Pulte money, or what's the thought on that?
Yes, that's actually in the warrant. That is, let me just move this out of the way here. That is actually Article 10 on the draft warrant. And so there are actually 2 sources of funds that can go to the trust from the Del Webb Chauncey Lake project. The first source, which is part of the original special permit, which is not in the warrant, and I can explain why not in a moment, is that if from 3 years from the start of the project, if Pulte has not constructed or is not constructing 25 units of affordable housing somewhere in Westborough, then they are obliged to make payments, the first being $400,000 and then annually $200,000 after that, in the total sum of $1.4 million. And that money is mitigation money, inclusionary zoning mitigation money that can only be used for affordable housing. The second pool of money is a result of the loss of the 70 affordable units because of the age restriction issue and the negotiated $9 million in zoning mitigation through the Zoning Board of Appeals. And that money is designed for affordable housing and support for senior service project, senior related projects, and was the request of the Board of Selectmen in asking in petitioning the Zoning Board of Appeals for those funds. And I can get you the exact wording of what the Board of Selectmen. That $9 million will go into the Del Webb Chauncey Lake Stabilization Fund to then be allocated by town meeting. However, since the state does not let money go into the stabilization fund in the year in which it's created, and we both created the fund in 2020 and received the first payment from Pulte in 2020, in last fiscal year, that money went into the general fund and has dropped into free cash. And it is the desire of the town to, as far as the finance team at this point and the town manager, that money be moved out of free cash because it's really not part of our reserves, and to where it's intended. And the preference is that it move directly into the housing trust, with the expectation that it would provide the trust with initial funds for operation and to start working on projects. Knowing that the 13 remaining payments would all go into the stabilization fund and would also go before town meeting when there was a request to transfer those funds either to our trust or to another project or fund or effort that's consistent with the mitigation.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Sean.
Sure, Mike.
Alan, can you go back to your slide on the autonomy of the housing trust, please?
On the
Yeah, it was one of your earlier slides with respect to the Board of Selectmen and the town meeting.
Okay, actually, I've got a better slide for that, which is a slide specifically about oversight.
Right, that's okay. That's what I was really after.
And so this is really the detail of the oversight we've planned. So under Mass General Law, municipal affordable housing trusts operate as a completely independent government entity. They're part of the town through bylaws, much in the same way that the housing authority is a completely independent municipal entity. The law, however, allows in their creation or amendment of the trust towns to either restrict or even expand the powers of the trust. And so on the restrictive side, our working group is proposing that the selectmen, any decision of the trust that meets certain thresholds would require going before the Board of Selectmen for a vote of concurrence. That would be any single transaction committing more than 50% of the trust's assets, or at any point in time where the cumulative commitment of trust assets exceeds 80% of assets, as well as any sale of real or personal property involving 50% or more of trust assets. And so really, rather than putting a fixed dollar amount on these thresholds, we did it as percentages. So as the trust grows, there's more flexibility, but it's all relative to the size and the operations of the trust. In looking at these numbers, myself, Hank, members of the working group have looked at many affordable housing trusts from other communities. Some are more restrictive, and that's actually inhibited their ability to work or take advantage of opportunities that come up where you need to move quickly. And others, many trusts have no additional oversight by the Board of Selectmen. And so we looked for someplace in the middle that we felt would, in addition to the custodianship being with the treasurer and operationally happening with our finance team, and the independent annual audits. On top of that, providing some additional level of oversight and fiscal review, and even an understanding of the activity of the trust throughout the year.
So as long as the trust remains within those percentages, they essentially have, it essentially has fairly broad autonomy within which to operate.
Yes.
Okay. Can you ever envision a time where our Board of Selectmen and our town meeting or our town meeting would not have the oversight that we are initially going to have?
Well, changing the overs, are you saying in practice as far as related to a project? I could see that. So for, and I want to be careful not to speculate on potential actual projects, right?
Understandable.
But, let's say we have, a resident, let's say we have a resident who, in their estate deeds a condo to the trust so that it becomes affordable after they sell, when they want to sell it or upon their death as part of their estate. And the trust looks at the condo and says, okay, to get it ready to bring it to market is going to cost, $55,000. And then we can turn around and sell it as affordable. If the assets of the trust at that point, were more, than $110,000, the trust would go at, would be free by majority vote of the trustees to go ahead and execute that acceptance of the gift, the expenditure on, the repairs, upgrade, whatever needed to happen, and then the marketing and sale of the unit.
Okay, but at the end of the day, the fiduciary responsibility rests with the trustees, does it not?
Yes.
Not the town.
Correct.
Well, the town, Mike, the town has control over how much money they give to the trust.
Right.
But once you give the money to the trust within the boundaries set by the trust document, the trust gets to spend the money.
Okay.
Of course, everything the trust does has to be in accordance with town bylaws, in accordance with town zoning requirements.
Right.
Okay. Thank
and
you.
So, we would follow the same process. So, for example, if we were looking, going back to that example where we have a condo that we're looking to fix up and sell as affordable, the process of attaching the affordability deed, we'd be interacting with the Housing Partnership Committee in the same way a private developer would, right? To marshal it through the permitting process and the deeding process and the approval by, DHCD, and those deed restrictions on the resale of affordable units, the Board of Selectmen by state law already concurs and has a concurrence vote. Actually, at several recent meetings, we've had affordable units that have been sold. And the Board of Selectmen votes concurrence that, yes, they see that the Housing Partnership says it's in compliance, DHCD has signed off, the buyers and sellers have signed off that they understand the deed restrictions, and then the Board of Selectmen says, okay, it's okay to go forward with the sale. And so the affordable projects we worked on that involve the transfer of real property follow the same rules and regulations that, any other public or private entity would follow as far as zoning, DHCD regulations, things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, so I think in reviewing, you were talking earlier about the 1.4 million in mitigation potentially that Pulte is going to pay,
right,
and that would end up in this trust.
That would go into the mitigation stabilization fund that was created in June, and then town meeting would vote to transfer it to the trust.
Okay.
At an appropriate time.
And then the other, I guess, roughly now 8.3, 8.4 million going to the Dell Webb Chauncey Trust would have to be voted over in any portion to the Affordable Housing Trust if it was to be moved there, or does it have a separate purpose and
It
not
would have to be
included?
that those funds and all the funds going to the Del Webb Chauncey Lake Stabilization Fund, to transfer them out of that stabilization fund requires a majority vote by town meeting.
Okay.
The trust meets one purpose, but there are other purposes that that are under the guidance of that mitigation that the town could decide to spend that money on.
Gotcha.
And so should the trust have an opportunity or a project, we may come to the town and ask for some of those funds. And it'll be up to town meeting to decide if that's an appropriate utilization.
Okay.
For example, can I ask, could some of that Dell Webb money be used to build a senior center or work on or rehab the senior center?
I believe, yes.
So that money you would want to keep out of the trust, out of the affordable housing.
Correct. That money would go to the stabilization fund. If a project is designed that's for the senior center or the council on aging that's in line with the guidance, then town meeting could vote to move from the stabilization fund to that project.
Okay.
Beth, we need to be real careful when we talk about possibly using some of the Del Webb mitigation money for seniors. The town meeting warrant article did mention seniors, but it was not particularly specific about what that meant.
No,
So I expect there'll be quite a few conversations, and there'll have to be additional town meeting action to define what we mean by helping seniors.
No, I totally understand, but I mean, that was one of the many projects that are on the table, and I just wondered if that money was even available for that project.
So I guess at this point, what we know is that if it was going to be used for the Affordable Housing Trust, it would have to be voted by town meeting to be placed in the Affordable Housing Trust is sort of the relevant point for this discussion.
Right.
Correct.
Are there any other follow-up questions?
I think Paul does.
Yes, Paul.
Hi, quick question on that oversight thing. How could let's say that the assets became huge and we wanted to change that 50% to a dollar amount or a different percentage. How could we do that? Could the town do that? And is it a town meeting vote, or is it something also in the registration as, the charter or something?
So this oversight is a component of the declaration of trust. The declaration of trust can be modified. There's a process for that.
But the declaration of trust does not say that you have to go to town meeting to modify the declaration of trust.
Right. That is something that is currently our proposal. Doesn't have that. It has a supermajority of the trust. We are looking, there are some towns that to modify the trust might require a vote of the Board of Selectmen. That's still, we're still in the process. It's one of the final issues we're still discussing a little bit. And so if feedback guides us that there should be a process that allows modification of the trust in different ways, we're open to listening and considering those.
Because that sounds like the same people who would have, let's say, I thought it was an outsized amount of power would be the ones to decide to take it away from themselves.
I guess so, yes.
Okay.
Right.
Unless, but you're saying,
yeah, if
to modify the conditions.
Yeah.
So Paul, do you have feedback for the trust on that regard? I mean, I would encourage.
50% seemed like it could be a huge amount. If, who knows, maybe someone gives the trust $1 billion and then all of a sudden they get control over 50% of that. It just seems like open-ended.
So in practicality, most trusts get their funding from Community Preservation Act funds. By Mass General law, a small percentage of those funds are supposed to go to affordable housing, and the trust is the usual recipient, but those funds don't automatically transfer to the trust. They still require a vote. So most trust funding will come with specific projects or ideas in mind. And again, town meeting can control the amount of money that moves into the trust. Yes, trusts do get gifts and grants. Most grants into trusts are again related to specific projects. The trust is going to put up money. There's matching grant money to some percentage. Maybe a private developer is part of the equation to get all the dollars together for the project. And so in speaking, with members of our town council team, the feedback we've gotten is they're not aware of any case where there's been a misappropriation or mishandling of funds by an affordable housing trust. There are a few trusts that did undertake projects that for a variety of reasons didn't turn out as planned.
Is this setting up the trust separate from our funding the trust?
Yes.
Yes.
The two articles.
There are two separate articles.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? All right, Alan, thank you very much. This was excellent. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. If anyone has any further questions, please feel free to email. Please, I'll share out again the link. Join us on the community site. Any questions, concerns? We're adding some new questions that we want people to answer in partnership with the Master Plan Advisory Committee, who's also obviously looking at housing. And so I appreciate the time and the attention, and appreciate your support.
Any chance you could put the link in chat?
Yes.
Thank
you.
Or I think I've been provided it. I can email it out to the group.
Okay.
I will email it out to the group.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again. All right. So our other item was originally we were going to have the town manager here to walk through the warrant with us. Now we're going to be doing that along with the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday, but I think it still does make sense for us to just go through and try to plan out maybe who do we think we want to come before us to talk to some of these articles. I think as we go through them, there's some where it's maybe just a follow-up question from a liaison, but for others, there's enough there that we're going to want somebody to give us some additional details. I don't know if everybody has it in front of them. I can just refer to the articles and we can talk about them a little bit and see if folks would like somebody to come in for each of those articles, and I'll take notes and we can reach out for dates for participants. For Article 1 is prior year bills. And what happens here, for those who are new, is if something gets billed last year but didn't get paid within the proper time, it then has to be voted by town meeting to make that payment. And usually it's, imagine this time it was, the process of the mail and people weren't in the office. And so something didn't get mailed out in time. The Board of Health has, I think, a couple of items they need to pay, and it amounts to $1,080. I think, maybe Jody can ask them what they are and we can just get that, but I don't know that it requires really the Board of Health to come in to talk to us about that one.
I'd be happy to follow up with Steve Bakari if you want me to.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Number 2 is the adjustments to the operating budget, and that is new for fall town meeting. We do not have an article that is operating budget adjustments at the fall town meeting. So we'll be going through that in detail, and I think based on what we hear at Tuesday's meeting, we may need to add some additional people to future calls if necessary. All right. Article 3 is the Country Club Operating Committee. And Hank, as a member of the committee, I don't know if you want to give us a few words on this. Oh, I think you're on mute. Oh, we can't hear you.
My understanding is that this will be a revenue, a dollars neutral article, but I will investigate the details and understand. If it's not, I was under the impression that it's just a technical detail changing where the budget gets allocated as opposed to changing the amounts of money. If that's incorrect, I'll get back to the committee and we'll definitely need to bring people in to talk about what the changes are and why the changes make sense.
Gotcha.
So if it's not spending neutral when we're all done, we'll need to get people in.
Right. Thank you, Hank. Number 4. So number 4 is rescinding borrows. And I think this basically came out of conversations we had at, I don't know if it was, maybe it was last fall town meeting, where what happens is these monies have been allocated to specific projects and then weren't used. And at that meeting, sort of, it was thought that, hey, we'll take what was left over from these few projects and then cobble them together to support this new project. And based on discussions following that, I think that town is taking the stance that, hey, new projects need new funding, and let's just return unused funding from projects that for some reason maybe aren't getting completed.
Yeah, if I could, I mean, there's really no, we really have not, the money has not been borrowed. It's
Right.
what we're rescinding is the authority to borrow. There's no cash involved. And that's what's important about this whole thing is historically people somehow get confused and they somehow believe that there's actual money available that's already in the tax base, and that's not correct. These are authority to borrow. It's not real borrowings. It's not in the tax base. It's not in free cash. It's just authority to borrow money.
Right. Right. Thank you, Hank. Yeah, and you'll see some of these that, go back to 2007, 2009. And I don't know, the bottom one for Regal Cinema, I think that was when we took over the cinema. I don't know if people remember that town meeting, and in case the owner came back in and we had to pay the owner for taking over his cinema, that was what that money was for. So he came back before that occurred, though, he or she. So I think, we'll have the town manager in to one of our meetings to walk through this, and the finance director. And we can maybe also ask what other outstanding borrowings there are that they may consider for future return. So, so I think for Article 4, it'll be town manager / finance director. Okay, Article 5. So this is in this.
John, for Article 4, isn't it possible we'll just hear enough about it on Tuesday?
It is.
Okay.
It is, yeah. We'll see what happens on Tuesday. Good point. Article 5, this is something I think we had last year and maybe the year before that. It's a new tax on Lyft and Uber. And then those monies get allocated to us. The DPW director has to state what the money is going to be used for. So technically it does require being allocated to a project in town. So this is sort of a formality. We're not going to say no to free money, but they do need to designate a project, and it does need to be voted on. My guess is, looking at the other items that are on this warrant, the DPW director will be coming before us sometime, so we could always follow up on this one if we, we're interested. Number 6 is the capital improvement plan. And they actually came to us at our last meeting. Or was it the one before that? 2 meetings ago. They came to us 2 meetings ago, meeting number 2. Oh, and walked through the capital improvement plan. These are all the articles that were passed over at the annual town meeting, though. So you'll see 6A, B, and it goes up through K. So the majority of articles are for the DPW. I think we want to get the DPW director in here, right? Maybe,
Yep.
You know, we can go a couple weeks out. I don't know if he has, you know, at this point, the warrant isn't closed. I don't know that he would be adding any other additional warrant articles. But, you know, since we're meeting with the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday jointly, you know, I didn't put out an agenda for Monday, and, you know, we can decide at the end of this meeting if we want to invite people as early as next Thursday.
Sean,
Yes.
this is Paul. I was going to ask Christy tonight when this was presented, so I'll probably ask it Tuesday, and maybe that's the time to wait for. But you know, I'd like to see someone put priorities on these. You know, I know they'll say they need them all, and they're all number 1 or whatever. But just off the top of my head, not knowing the town's, you know, financial position at the moment, because we never really received other than it was better than the worst case. You know, I'm thinking we might want to preserve free cash at some, depending on all that. And there's no way for me, and I can do it if they won't prioritize them, but there's no way for me to know that they need the dump truck more than the sander or whatever, or the ones that are already done. So I don't know. I think I'll raise that Tuesday, but I don't know if
Sure. So all of these before last town meeting came before the capital expenditure planning committee.
Right.
And at one point we were provided their votes on all these articles. So they sort of put numbers on them as to, you know, what they thought was more important than other items.
they rated them.
Yeah, we can, I can track that down, or Andrew, I don't know if, as the member of the committee, I don't know if you have sort of your final votes from then, and we could bring those up and use them. And then at this point, I don't think the committee's going to meet again before the fall town meeting, but Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't heard about another follow-up meeting. Let me see what I can find on our old votes and see what I can share with this group.
Okay, thank you very much. And I can check. I think it probably is somewhere out on the town website as an appendix to, you know, the annual town meeting or something. I'll take a look as well. I'm sure I can get it from the town manager or assistant town manager.
That sounds great. I know that's all pre-pandemic, so it might make a change, but I kind of doubt it for these items. I think they're agnostic to that situation. So really just a dollar thing. So yeah, okay, great. Thank you.
Right. So, and I don't know, you know, that we necessarily need to go through each of these that are, you know, that have the DPW, you know, next to them. We can bring Director Payne in here and talk to him about them. So what you will know for some of the newer folks is there are multiple methods that the DPW pays for new equipment. Some is free cash of the town if it's going to be generally used, but if it's going to be used by the water plant or by the sewer, then it's funded through those mechanisms and isn't necessarily, you know, doesn't affect, well, the general real estate taxes of, I guess neither does free cash, right? Free cash is money that's already been allocated. But so as we walk through them, some of them won't have any cost to the town, others will. And so that may be reflected in how people think of them. So that's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And then I is fire department. And I think they just have that one article where we're doing the separate article at the special town meeting on the 29th. Oh, and Walter, I guess since you've been watching some of these meetings, I don't know, you may know what we covered for the town meeting coming up on the 29th. I can forward you the latest warrant for that meeting, so you're aware. There's now 3 articles on it.
Okay, sounds good. Actually, I think I got that in. I mean, the town sent it out, so I think I may have it
Okay,
somewhere.
gotcha, excellent. So command vehicle replacement, and I think this one was pushed forward from last year, possibly. But you know, at some point, we probably folks want the fire chief to come in and talk about this. Okay, all right. So, so DPW director, fire chief.
Sean, what was the name of it was a command vehicle? Is that what you called it?
Yes, it is 6I. It's called command vehicle replacement. You know, the current one, it gives you some of the details. The current command vehicle is a 2007 Chevy Suburban. So I think the last time they came in to upgrade a vehicle, it was because the deputy chief's foot was going through the floor of the truck. So I'm sure this is needed. But I think it is also the one that goes to every major incident and sort of, you know, where the chief and everybody is running ops from. So, but it would be great to hear from him on that. J, it's still the purchase of 3 cruisers. I know, I think at one point it had gone down to 1, and then did 1 not get passed at annual town meeting? Or did that even get?
That did get passed because remember there was some controversy over it looking too military.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think 1 did get passed, and it was due to the. I mean, they didn't hire as many officers, so they didn't need all these. So the question is, if
Right.
so, we would have to find out: are they hiring more people too, or not? So.
Sean, I've got information on that in my liaison report. I met with
Oh,
the
great.
chief yesterday.
All right,
I
great.
can
Great.
cover it then.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Okay.
And then the school department has 1 article. And I believe they have another article later in the warrant. So at some point, I'm guessing the school department will come in front of us. Article 7 is the T mower for the country club. I don't know if folks want a representative of the country club to come here, or
I would just like an explanation since we were told they couldn't make it through the summer without it. I thought, as I recollect, we did make it. So I'm just wondering how we did that and if we still.
Paul, I mean, they didn't say that they couldn't make it through the summer. They said they were at risk if the T-mower, if the machine they had stopped working, they'd have to go out and rent a machine somewhere, and it wasn't in the budget. They didn't say they couldn't make it. They said they were at risk, right?
Okay, thank you.
I know, and we, you know, on these articles, we ought to go back and look at how we voted before we move the town meeting out. Because if we're going to vote differently, we better have reasons for why we're voting differently. I believe we supported most of these articles the last time around, and they were pulled. They were pulled in the end game. They were pulled by the town manager and by the proponents. They weren't canceled. You know, we didn't vote them down. they were pulled by the proponents in an effort to try and conserve cash till we had a better view of what our financial situation would be. So if we,
So-
if we, I don't have any problem with taking a different position, but if we take a different position, we ought to be really clear about why we're taking a different position.
Right.
So
Jody?
Sean, yeah, if you go back to right around March 16th, you'll find the draft report and recommendations that we had prepared for the first town meeting that we held because we ended up postponing and going into a June meeting. But somewhere around March 16th, you should have a copy of the final draft R&R. And then all the recommendations would be in there.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment, except as affected by the external things that have happened since in the larger sense, not on the individual items.
Right. So so I will send that around to everybody. That will include our votes, and I believe it also had the Board of Selectmen votes on it. It was basically ready to go to the printer, I think, before we pushed the meeting and then had to revisit everything. Right. Article 8 is town water system improvements. It's to borrow the sum of $1,980,000 or such other amount as the town meeting may approve. And this would be borrowed by the so it's actually, well, I guess it's technically borrowed by the town, but it's being repaid through the water retained earnings, correct, Hank?
That's correct. The bond amortization and interest is paid from retained earnings, which is refreshed from the ratepayers. And the long-term projection from the DPW is that the current rates are sufficient to fund the planned capital improvements and operating expenses for the foreseeable future. So spending the money is not a particular threat to the rate structure at this point.
Right, and it's a DPW article, so we're gonna
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we're gonna have the DPW director come in, so okay. Articles 9 and 10, we just reviewed with Selectman Edinburgh. So, we can, at some point in a couple of weeks, I don't think we take any votes yet. I think we don't take votes until sort of it's closer to a final version of the town meeting warrant. But I think we're good on Articles 9 and 10. Any questions related to those? 9 is the creation of the Affordable Housing Trust, and 10 is the funding using the 642 plus million initial payment from Pulte.
You meant 1,000, right?
Did I
Well,
say
it's
million?
15 100s. Yeah.
It's million. Yeah. Oof. Okay. Yeah, 1,000. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That'd be a nice fund.
Paul would definitely want to put some restrictions on that. Okay. All right. Number 11 is facility rental revolving account. And I guess this would be the town manager. It's the Board of Selectmen, so the town manager could talk to us about this. Looks like it's taking the receipts from rentals of town properties and then using them to support the expenses of those properties. Maximum amount of $25,000.
I'd be really curious if town properties include schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't include schools, it may be appropriate for that language to be a little more clear, or at least that the motion, or somehow you got to make it clear whether it includes schools or not. My guess is that it does not include schools, though they are town property.
Right.
They have their own revolving accounts.
I believe they have their own accounts for that. And again, just for clarity to the voters, we got to make sure that
Right.
we present it in a way that voters clearly understand that does not include schools. It may or may not be important, but it's important to be clear.
Yes, yes.
I would also add, I wonder if the activities of the rec department are part of this as well, because we've heard that the rec department pays for use of some facilities, and if so, is that money that's just going from one pocket of the town to another?
I believe the rec department pays the school. We can verify, but I don't believe that they pay the town itself.
Right.
I would love to know for clarity's purposes. So thank you.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So when the town manager comes in, we'll speak to Article 11. Article 12 is an easement at 50 Eli Whitney. This is a school committee's article, and it is related to the Fail Elementary School building. So I think we'll have when the schools come in, we can get an update on that. It seems pretty straightforward, but we'll get an update on that. Article 13 is related to the town seal. And others may know more about this than I do. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the town seal and possibly changing the town seal. So I guess they're getting recommendations, and I think this is possibly a vote. It has to be done by a vote of town meeting. So we'll talk to the town manager. I don't know if she's going to come to us with what those other recommendations are, or like I guess we'll find out. I don't know if we're actually voting for a new seal or we're voting for something else.
I mean, the article does not seem to talk about voting for a seal, but the town manager's statement implies that we're voting for a seal.
Yeah. So I think there's more to come on this one. 14 is the amendment to the general bylaws to create the community development department. And the town manager came to us a couple meetings ago and talked about the staffing study. And this, I believe, was elevating the head of the building department to be over, I think, 2 or 3 different groups. And so I think this would vote for that change. And then the article below it, number 15, votes for a step up in salary in position grade commensurate with this new position. So Article 14 and Article 15 are related, and we would cover those with the town manager. Article 16, and this is related to, and John probably knows the most about these, about updates to the annual town meeting and fall town meeting dates. I think we had to vote for changes this year to place them after the elections in the fall, just because I think the town clerk, when there's a presidential election and now there's early voting, basically is just swamped up until election date and then needs a little bit of time to turn around fall town meeting. Sort of similar in the spring, we've somehow done elections right before the annual town meeting, and then if new people are elected in, they are then immediately sitting at town meeting, and the thought is, well, maybe they should be elected shortly after town meeting, since the prior selectmen or school committee or whomever did all that work in preparation for town meeting. So I think that those are more timing related articles.
I sent some comments about that, and I haven't heard the proponents go into the details. So I just like to say, I'd like to talk to the committee about this after we hear the proponents explain
Okay.
the purpose.
Gotcha. No, thanks, John. So if I look, and that's sort of where it stands now at 16 articles. I think there are like maybe 3 more that are going to be added, definitely. So for the time being, what I'm showing is the DPW needs to come in. We have 1 article for fire and possibly 1 article for police. We have a couple for the school department and then the town manager. So at this point, I think those are the 5 groups that need to come in and speak to us. Is there any
Yeah.
groups I've overlooked?
Pending what we see in the budget adjustments.
Right, correct.
I mean, if the budget adjustments don't seem to be particularly major, it'll be an easy meeting. If the budget adjustments are large, it'll require more conversation.
Okay. Now, at this point, I think, so we definitely have the DPW director come in. Do we want to try and see if we can get him on the schedule?
Sean, I can contact him after Tuesday when we have some understand and get an understanding of his availability for either a Monday or a Thursday.
Okay. So let's see here. So we've got a Tuesday meeting next week. I mean, really at this point, the warrant doesn't look overwhelming for us. So I would say we could make that our only meeting next week, Tuesday. Coming out of Tuesday, I can check in with people and just say, okay, yeah, it still looks like we want these few people. Do you want to see when we can get them in? And maybe shoot to have somebody in the following Monday.
Which is which date? Let me see.
Yeah.
So next week, the 22nd would be a Tuesday, and the following Monday is the 28th.
The 28th.
Which is the day before STM.
Oh, right.
Oh,
Right. That's true. We have a Tuesday meeting that week as well. Okay. So we've got the 22nd with the BOS at 8 p.m. The 29th is the special town meeting. Tuesday, we could shoot for the 31st.
The 10,
September
October
31st. Yeah. October
October 1.
So that gives us Thursday, October 1st. Monday would be the 5th. Following Thursday is the 8th. So we could find out if anybody's available on those any one of those 3 dates. I'll go back and check. I think it was the 12th a holiday.
The 12th is Columbus Day.
12th is Columbus Day. So then we would go 8th to 15th. So 1st, 5th, 8th, and 15th. And we can see how next Tuesday goes and then start sending out invitations. Is that? I feel like we've got the time to.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
What was
great.
on the 22nd? I don't have anything on my calendar. Everybody
so Board of
left.
Selectmen.
Oh, the
9/22 is Board of Selectmen, AFC.
Oh,
That's the Tuesday. And then the following Tuesday, a special town meeting. That's the 29th. And then the following Thursday is October 1st.
thank you.
Then the next Monday is October 5th, and the next Thursday is October 8th.
Yeah. So the next potential date for us to meet solo as a group would be October 1st. All right.
Can I just, Sean, it was unclear to me the way the Tuesday meeting was posted, whether you have to post a separate meeting or the fact that it mentions that. So I would just check to make sure that's sufficient so you don't have to post a separate meeting, just so that joint meeting can happen on Tuesday. I don't
Gotcha.
remember what the rules are for posting joint meeting.
Gotcha. I'll confirm, and if need be, get
Yeah, worst
something
case,
in place
post one just for 8 o'clock. So
tomorrow. Right.
I just would hate to see that joint meeting not be able to happen because you were supposed to be posted separately, and I can't remember what the rules are for joint meetings.
Gotcha. Check with Wendy Mickle or?
Yeah, you could probably check with Wendy and or Christy and just ask if that posting is sufficient or not.
Okay.
My recollection from my recent training, as in yesterday, was that you would have to, in a joint meeting, each post.
Each post an agenda? All right. I love that. We're already teaching us stuff.
It certainly doesn't hurt.
Post meeting. Hey,
Thanks.
that's impressive.
But, hey, I
Impressive.
just read the material. I'm not sure.
All right. Excellent. So let me confirm. So my to-dos were to send out to the group our draft from the original annual town meeting last March, get that out to everybody. And then I'll work with Andrew and talk to Chrissy about trying to get the final notes from the capital expenditures committee. And those meetings were, I think, early last December. So I'll get those two things out to folks, see if I can get that done tomorrow. Was there anything else on the agenda other than the, or are people ready to move on to liaison reports?
Sure.
Yep.
All right, I think Mike, you had our first liaison report.
So I met with Chief Laurie and Deputy Chief Minardi yesterday. It was a pretty wide-ranging discussion, but of issues with specific interest to us were really matters related to the staffing plan and the corresponding equipment needs. So the staffing study was conducted based on 2018 and eventually recommended a complement of 46 officers and supervisors by 2024, FY 2024. As of today, we have 35 officers. And this number is really not aligned with the staffing schedule that was recommended in the study, and which was eventually approved by the town. It's really clear from the conversation I had with them that they would like to stay in line with the onboarding schedule laid out in the study. But it's also really clear that they recognize that these COVID-induced exigencies that we're experiencing can upset the plans. Right now, the biggest concern has been, and it remains as far as the chief and the deputy are concerned, coverage on the midnight to 8 shift. When the chief last met with us, he explained that that there were only 3 officers on that shift. And consequently, there's nobody at the police station between 12 midnight and 8 a.m. until the rest of the officers start coming in. So if you show up for any reason at the station, you're directed by signage to pick up a phone and connect with the dispatch at the fire station. The exception to that staffing is that if a prisoner is being held in the facility, one of the officers must either come off the road and monitor that prisoner, or they'll call in an overtime officer. Given the fact there are only 3 officers on duty and they have to cover the entire town, residential and commercial areas, and whatever incidents happen to occur, it looks like overtime is going to be the most likely scenario going forward. And if we add to that the chief's emphasis on supervision and training, the supervision of that midnight to 8 shift is really impacted. So what does it mean? And I guess it really means for us, as the town goes through the planning or the budget process, we are likely going to see a request at the fall town meeting for one staff position. And probably an additional 2 to 3 staff requests at the annual town meeting for fiscal 22. And of course, that's going to go, it's going to have with it corresponding equipment, cruisers, et cetera. And just to reiterate, we did only approve 1 of 4 requested cruisers at the last annual town meeting. So long term, and again, subject to the budget process and any other influences that might come up, we're probably going to see staffing and equipment requests aligned with the staffing study, but this time through fiscal year 25. We seem to have lost some time due to this COVID issue. So those seem to be the major issues that they're concerned with at this point. And, you know, those are the things we're going to have to deal with as they come through the budget process through the town and on to us. As an aside, I did have an opportunity to tour the facility. And, you know, from a layman's perspective, it's really pretty amazing. We really have a self-contained facility with very contemporary and indefinite capabilities. For example, there's a small crime lab. There's secure prisoner handling facilities. There are very reasonable amenities, as I would call them, for the welfare and morale of the police officers. At the same time, being contained within the Forbes building, what was pointed out to me was that they're able to use other amenities in the building, such as using the Great Hall for training. And it cuts down on space needs inside the police station itself that can be used for other important purposes. So the chief said to me when the COVID concerns end, he is hoping to have a public open house. And I recommend to all of us, to all of you on the committee, if that happens, take the opportunity to go. I think you get a really different perspective on what we as a committee are actually addressing with regard to the police department. Any questions?
Mike, I have a question. So you said there's 35 current positions.
Correct.
By 2024, 2025 now, 44 is anticipated.
46 is
46.
what the staffing study calls for. That's
Okay.
37 patrol officers and the balance are supervisory personnel.
Do we anticipate, though, over that period of time, any retirements?
I think the chief has factored in retirement issues. We have a fairly young department, in truth, so I don't know that there are going to be that many, let's call them age-related retirements. My suspicion is that if there are any retirements, they would be medical. And that's right now, I never had a conversation about those items with him, other than they factored in some of these some personnel turnover.
Gotcha.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any other reports?
Yeah, I sat in on a kind of a re-kickoff of the Westborough master planning process, which took a pause during COVID with everyone deployed on a lot of other activities during that time. I'll remind you, you can go to the website, westboroughmasterplan.com, to review just the overview of the planning process and opportunities for public input there too. And they're still taking lots of input and welcome ideas and input from the community. So anybody who wants to take a look at where the state of the documents at westboroughmasterplan.com, please do that. So there's 11 subcommittees working who are doing sections of the master plan. And Jim Robbins went through where we were in the process. And there's a baseline template that each of these subcommittees are preparing to offer into the consultants who are going to be putting together and writing the final master plan. And we heard an example of the work from the Land Use Committee. We're still in the phase of the planning process called Reflect, which goes on through the rest of this year. And that's sort of the baseline data and the status of the issues in the community. So that subcommittee created their own list of issues. They do issues, and then they take a look at opportunities for planning to address those issues in the next 10 or 15 years. Then they sorted and prioritized them and listed them. So the timeline for these subcommittees is to put together their templated list of priority issues and opportunities for the master plan by October 2nd. So we're still in this reflecting on where we are phase, and we're moving into October 8th, and the full advisory committee meeting will be meeting again. And in mid-October, there's an economic development roundtable connected to the master plan. And then options then will be explored and prioritized in November, December, and January. A confirmation of the master plan will come in March and April, and you'll see a final master plan for the town next May. So I'll bring back more to you as I attend these other meetings as a member of the Public Health Committee. But I would encourage you to take a look at the process online as well. And that's it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any other updates? All right. So public reminders for viewers. I guess there's a special town meeting on the 29th. Any other reminders? I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
I second.
Right. Oh, let me go through everybody. All right. Votes, Miss Hensley?
Yes.
Oh, I think Beth left. Miss Board?
Yes.
Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Mr. Leslie?
Yes.
Mr. Bradley?
Bradley, yes.
Mr. Hugel?
Yes.
Mr. Beretti?
Yes.
And Keo, yes. All right, everyone. Thank you very much, and hope to see you guys on Tuesday at 8 o'clock.
Thanks.
Have a
Hey,
wonderful
Sean.
evening.